Hello, YouTube. Michael Constantine here. I know how I look, but I actually get a lot of really great ideas. And one of those ideas, quite some time ago, I shared with a government board, a government office in Fort Bend County. I had originally owned a home down there in that area, and I wanted to start a community-based care network for vulnerable and abused youths and people who were affected by those circumstances across a wide spectrum of ages. I wanted to start community-based care because the stories coming out of foster care were terrible. They were really bad. I talked to quite a number of people who had been in foster care, and they were talking to me and telling me about how they had been sexually abused or how they had been neglected. They had suffered violence, and a lot of bad things had happened to them. And I wanted more oversight for people who were affected by those circumstances. Well, what ended up happening was the idea caught on with the legislature, and I wrote the executive branch about it as well. I wrote a lot of people about it, actually, because the need for reform is just so great. There's so many people out there that are suffering under the current system, and it was just horrific. The stories that I was hearing from people were just terrible. You'd have one foster parent with a batch of as many as 6 children in some cases, sometimes more, and very, very little oversight of those foster parents by Child Protective Services and the associated supervising agencies. And so more neglect and more abuse was occurring for people who were in foster placement sometimes than there was in the homes that they were moved from. Just imagine a home where the kids are taken for neglectful supervision, and while in foster care, they suffer injury because the caregiver has their attention divided so much that they're spread too thin to be able to care for all the children in their care. And so I wanted to establish something more akin to what you would see in like a very large group home. And people would be separated based off of their behavior, their ages, their sex, and different health conditions and so forth that they had. The problem was that I haven't been able to get sponsorship to be able to establish these things myself. I'm actually working on a publication right now. It's going to be out soon. It's called The Origins of Sunshine, and it explains a lot of the shortfalls of the existing system for kids that are coming from abusive homes and failures by the agency to properly investigate those situations that are occurring where sexual abuse, physical abuse, coercion, threats, violence, and things like that are happening. And the agency is not equipped to deal with children who have communication barriers, such as autism and conditions that would impair the child's ability to establish rapport with caseworkers or people questioning them. And the agency often fails to understand that there are children who have socially avoidant behaviors, such as the child the book was written about, the child I was writing about, who have these communication barriers, and they are misread as a false positive for guilt or as suspicious behaviors indicating the child is withholding information intentionally. In this particular book, I'm going to get to how community-based care is related to this. The child was not removed from that situation, and there were a lot of people who were there who were involved in what was going on. It was actually a situation where it was a family conspiracy that was happening. Why foster care would not have been better. The reason that the child in the book didn't share the little bit that they did know was because they feared CPS and the caseworkers, people questioning them. They didn't trust them. They couldn't remember some things. And also, the deal is that the notion had been placed with the protagonist that being in foster care would be more abusive or neglectful than the existing family environment that they were in. So it occurred to me, after encountering a number of people who had been from those circumstances and what they shared with me, how they had been sexually exploited, abused, physically abused, hurt by other kids, hurt by foster parents, all variety of different things have happened to people. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the stories that people have. But it's absolutely true. These things are true. When you talk to a lot of these people, they have no reason to lie. That's the thing. It's not profitable for them in any way to lie. And so the situation was that what I eventually realized is that if you have multiple people who are functioning as independents in an environment where groups of children are being supervised, it would be very difficult for one individual to engage in any form of misconduct where they weren't found out for either threatening or abusing or exploiting one or more of the children in those group environments. Now, the thing about this is that you have to have oversight. You have to have multiple people supervising who are accountable to the same regulatory commissions and so forth. And you have to have people watching the watchers. That's the deal. If you allow foster care, foster parents, okay, to take in kids as individuals or as a couple, there are so many children in those placements that it is impossible. It's literally impossible to supervise what is going on in those individual family homes. And this is going to put a lot of people off, but it's the truth. Those types of situations, individual foster placements, unless they're situations where that family is trying to adopt one or more children rather than just foster them for a short time, those situations have to come to an end. And the reason for that is that it's simply not practical or possible to adequately supervise what is going on in those homes. Caseworker visits like what? Once a month? Once every 3 months? They might have 15, 20, 30, 40 different children on their case docket. And so from an enforcement standpoint, in terms of supervision, it's impossible for them to adequately ensure that each one of those children is being cared for properly, they're not being neglected and abused. And if you have a group care setting, like almost like what they have in those children's behavioral hospitals, where people are in common spaces and they have their own rooms and so forth, but you've got groups of adults, you've got several different people, it might be a significant staff of several dozen people that are supervising over all the people in that facility. I'm not saying it's not possible for something bad to happen. There's still going to be incidents where the children do something they're not supposed to do. But it'll be a lot more difficult for adults that are responsible for their care and supervision to be engaging in any kind of conduct that would be deemed inappropriate or illegal. That's the reason why I advocate for community-based care programs, because CPS is failing these children so badly. They're failing them. I could tell you stories, without naming anyone, but people who have been in those circumstances have talked to me, and they have shared their perspective, and it's just unacceptable. What's going on out there is completely unacceptable. You've got kids dying in washers, clothes washers, and things like that in foster care. You have a house that burns down, family placement. There's 5 or 6 kids, one state I was reading about, where the house burnt to the ground, and they were in state conservatorship, even though they were with a family placement. And they had been removed for nothing. There were no grounds for the removal, and all the children died. It's terrible. There were no fire safety protocols in place in that situation to prevent the structure from burning down, or to alert the people inside the house that the house was on fire while they were asleep. And that's just one story. So I came up with this notion a number of years ago, before the state of Texas had even conceived of it. And I said, you know what? We need to institute this nationwide. We need to completely, fundamentally overhaul how foster care is done. And it's all about providing a better environment and better care for the kids that are not with family. These individual foster couples, foster parents, I'm not saying some of them aren't great people, but for every 10 of them, there's one that is not doing what they're supposed to do, or there's something really, really bad going on. I can't say in exact percentages what that is actually like, but they have records. The state has records that are often very much undisclosed and heavily redacted about those situations. It's going to take a long time to get these reforms in place. I've known people personally that have suffered, and I care a great deal about getting these solutions in place. Despite how I look, I'm actually somebody that really pushes for these reforms, because I've seen the consequences. I have seen it firsthand of allowing things to remain the same.